I would like to invite now Joshua, Resnick, Ted, Lindsley, and Greg to join me for our panel. And I eventually thought that we were going to be more optimistic in the in this view of, oh, let's become an aviation company. But I've seen a lot of cautionary tales from our testimonials this morning. I don't know if you guys look at Alejandro and Ramiro, but they're showing the scratches in the face of, going from surveying to becoming aviation company. What I would like to do with this group is to try to enumerate or make it as realistic as possible in terms of what are the challenges of moving from doing whatever you're doing. Alejandro was doing GIS, Ramiro was doing GPS, and they're both aviation companies today. And I would like to ask Joshua to give us a little bit of an introduction into himself and what his company is doing, and then we'll do the same with Ted and with Greg. Let's start with Josh.
Hey, everybody. And Juan, thanks for having me here. It's really great to be part of this. My name is Joshua Resnick. I'm the CEO of Parallel Flight Technologies, and we are building a new type of propulsion system for drones so that they can fly for a long time while carrying a heavy payload. So right now, with the technology that's out there, you really are forced to choose one or the other, flight time or payload, but we're creating a system that you really can have both. And I will share some of that with all of you, and then hopefully the panel can help and the audience can help tie together how this technology can influence the mapping work that everybody here does. So Juan, would you like me to do my brief presentation now, or are we going to have the other intros first?
No. Go ahead with your presentation. Then Ted has something that he can show, and Greg is going to talk to us about himself, and then we enter into the discussion. I have some questions prepared, but I would like you guys to introduce yourself. I had the opportunity to introduce myself early, so it's only fair that I give you the same chance.
Yeah, the beast. So this is, like I said, Parallel Flight Technologies, and we are a startup company. We've received funding from private investors, but also from NASA, NSF, and the USDA. And the problem that we really are setting out to solve is the endurance issue while carrying a heavy payload. So when you talk about all electric drones, and when we say drone here, we really are talking about multi-rotors. The situation is different for fixed wing aircraft. But when we're talking about multi-rotors, when you start putting a payload onto that aircraft that is substantially approaching the mass of the aircraft, then you really have about 15 minutes of flight time, which limits a lot of the kind of work that you can do. There have been gas-powered drones that have been developed, but in the multi-rotor space at least, they are really limited on payload because of the technology that's been deployed. So we've developed a new type of propulsion system called parallel hybridization, and it's a 10x gain over existing solutions. And the beta aircraft that we're developing now, and that's not what you see in the picture. I'll show beta in a minute. What's in the picture here is a prototype, but the beta aircraft that we're developing now will fly 100 pounds of payload for 2 hours, and then 40 pounds for 4 hours or 10 pounds for 7 hours. Obviously, it's a flight curve, right? So, and in the types of markets that we've primarily been focused on, having zero visibility capability is great. So, for example, in the firefighting space, being able to fly through heavy smoke, fly at nighttime, stuff like that. Obviously, those are the types of functionalities that are built into the flight controller. Let's look at kind of the key metric here. So on the bottom is flight time in hours, And
Okay.
on the vertical payload, or the vertical axis, is payload over empty weight ratio.
I can see that. That I can see.
Yeah, the payload to empty weight ratio. So a 1-to-1 payload would mean or 1-to-1 would mean the payload weighs as much as the drone. So if you look at electric multi-rotor technology, it really falls on this kind of curve going from about 12 minutes to an hour, depending on the payload. Then the gas solution that's been developed by a number of companies for endurance is serial hybridization, and those serial hybrids can fly, anywhere from an hour, hour and a half to 4 hours, but the payload is pretty limited. You really can't get a super heavy payload relative to the weight of the aircraft on there, and this is a function of the powertrain architecture, which just ends up being really heavy. So what we've developed is this new technology, parallel hybridization, that allows this kind of 1-to-1 payload to weight ratio, and then also extends from 2 hours at full payload to 6 or 8 hours at the tail of this curve. So it's really in the upper right hand side, and this just opens up a lot of different applications, and I'm sure there'll be applications relevant for mapping that this group can explore. And in terms of our progress, we really started in earnest in 2018, and we began with a very rudimentary proof of concept of our powertrain system, and then we built a fully functional prototype that we could test in real world conditions. And now we're building beta aircraft, which is beta in the sense that we can deliver it to a small group of early customers, and we have a number of customers lined up for Q3 of this year. And then of course from there we'll go on to production. And this is what beta actually looks like. The airframe is already constructed, and we are doing the final work on the hybrid power module, which is the propulsion system, and doing the final integration there. So we will be test flying this aircraft within the next few weeks, actually. So it's moving along quite well. And in terms of competition, the platforms that are out there that are the real competitors, I would say, are primarily the unmanned helicopters, Schiebel, Yamaha, and Swiss. I forget what their full company name is, but I think it's Swiss Drones. All make really beautiful helicopter style aircraft, and all of these are gas powered aircraft. And I think when you look at the performance specs, the thing that really stands out is these are really high cost platforms. They are lower payload to weight ratio than what we're achieving, and they also have really high footprint and high maintenance costs. They're extremely complicated machines on the inside, and our system is modular. So when, for example, like if one of these hybrid power modules is time for its overhaul, you just pull it off and put a new one on, and you can ship it back to the factory, and you don't have to have a technician in the field. Your asset never has to go down, basically. It's always ready to go because of that modularity. And then in terms of electric competition, I mean, Griff is kind of leading the pack in terms of heavy lift, but their systems are really, really short flight time. They're kind of in this category of flying batteries, right? So they're good for quick missions, but the kind of huge batteries that you need for the battery swap and the generators and the infield support infrastructure is really challenging. So there's a lot of drawbacks to the other systems that we feel that we've answered with our system. Anyway, thanks for listening. That's a quick intro to PFT. You can reach out to me at joshua@parallelflight.com, and I'm really excited to hear from the other industry leaders on the call, and also from everybody listening in, and see how we can, how mapping can integrate with the technology that we're developing.
Perfect. You were a little skeptic when I invited you to this. You said nothing to do with mapping, and I said, well, I wanted you to bring this to the table because one of the big impediments from my point of view, to the to equating unmanned to man is I can fly 3.5 hours with the citation and cover thousands of square miles. Um, and if the view, the snapshot that we have in time of today is the basis in which you're making the decision to move into UAV mapping, you're never going to get into UAV mapping. What I'm saying is that there are people out there, people like you, Joshua, and your team, developing a platform that will allow us to fly, 4 hours, and then start competing with manned aviation seriously. I wanted people to have a look at what you're doing, because this is not hydrogen cell fuel cells or anything esoteric.
Right.
I mean, if you let me tell people where you come from, but you were originally with Tesla, and the semi truck, battery. You're involved in this technology, and you have 40, 50 years ahead of you developing this until the point that we can say, okay, we can fly as 3-4 hours and produce a map that is now competing with a Cessna. Perhaps not a citation at 28,000 feet, but a Cessna 172, yeah, perfectly fine. So getting into this industry right now is also opening potential to upgrade into something that will competing with photogrammetry companies with manned aircraft. That was my intention with inviting you here. Okay, Ted, enough of Joshua. Let's talk about you. Ted, tell
Oh
us
God, what
about
do you
you.
want to talk about? I'm Ted Lindsley. I'm the CEO of SqwaQ. If you know what SqwaQ means, then we probably share the same aviation vocabulary that a lot of people on here do. For example, I'm an SME on UAS, AI, UTM, FAA, DO-160, AS9100, and FARs as they relate to RPAs. So if that makes you scratch your head, I'll be working on LMNOP this year to complete the vocabulary. That's kind of what we get into with aviation stuff. SqwaQ is basically, well, we are a communications company, and we provide multi-redundant connectivity for not just drones, but all types of mobile IoT devices and robots. We have 3 different form factors that we're already shipping right now for connectivity. For drones, this is a little 3-inch by 6-inch module board, only weighs 270 grams. It's an easy OEM design-in or retrofit that is AS9100 certified, DO-160 compatible. It is the only LTE airborne device in the world that's carrier approved. But we don't just do that. Some of the stuff that we do also is, for example, autonomous cars, where they need to stream 4 or more cameras at one time. This is a good example of doing that. Planes and aircraft that want to fly long distance beyond line of sight, you're going to have pilot view cameras as well as multi-redundant cameras, and we support that. Here's some stuff with earth moving equipment, where we have a guy 1,000 miles away in an air-conditioned booth while he's operating earth moving equipment with cameras and sensors, so they can literally work in different areas. Our conception of UTM is really, it makes no sense, because ultimately we're talking about the integration of aircraft rather than segregation. This is how it works right here. This is nationwide coverage, cross country, less than a half second latency. Turn left, turn right. That's actually what you see coming back at you across the country. And on the screen here, you see a typical in the analytics. That's a 53 millisecond ping time, and it's doing what, 33, 35 megs from air to ground in real time in this device that's just the size, barely larger than a dollar bill. So I've been at this for 10 years. We've got pretty much covered all the angles, and I'm happy to bring my expertise to bear today. Thanks, Juan.
Yeah, but Ted is very modest. He was designing UAVs, composite UAVs, 10 years ago, more or less.
Yeah, so AVA was the first one to begin type class certification with the FAA in 2016. That's a 6-rotor, multi-rotor, 54 pounds, but carries 11 pounds for up to 4 hours in a hybrid version. And yeah, the company just ran out of money. Even with $95 million in orders and $2 million in deposits for an escrow, still couldn't get venture capital because they just didn't understand FAA guidelines. They're starting to understand it now, though.
Yeah, why don't we do an event on venture capitals and leave that for another day?
I'd rather not, but
Okay. Greg, how about you? Tell us about you.
Sure. So I'm more on the data side of things. I am the director of applied research at GeoAcuity, and we are a full service GIS consultancy. And so my background though is I came from a traditional kind of academic track and was an assistant professor in ecology in the sciences, and got excited about drone technology and what it could do on the data side of things, particularly for science. That I left academia, and that was about 6 years ago, and joined the commercial drone industry. I worked for some of the hardware as well as the photogrammetric side on the software companies, and done a lot of training as well around integrating drones as tools for geospatial data collection. But we do everything from kind of on the ground GIS data collection to drone imagery, to we build portals and other database management for different GIS softwares as well. So I've kind of run the spectrum from kind of boots on the ground to more thinking about data and data management. I've also worked a lot on some of the disaster response and emergency data capture around coordinating UAVs for California wildfires and doing rapid damage assessment with public safety teams. So I do data on all fronts, whether the air is smoky or not. So
Great. Yeah, there is a big difference between emergency response and live coverage, live processing of data and mapping. In mapping, we mostly deal with the acquisition of that data, right? And turning that data into a product that our customers can use. And I've seen, three main issues. One is aviation. Going from dealing with a pickup truck and suddenly you're dealing with an airplane. Now you don't necessarily go to the Department of Motor Vehicles. You have to go to the FAA, and that is a big cultural change for every and any company thinking about moving into this. The other one is the selection of the platform. What are we trying to do? Like Andrew said, with the end in sight. And the other one obviously is the data, the amount of data. And I don't know if you guys heard my anecdote with the citation, but I one of the most expensive mistakes of my life was connecting 5 phase 1 cameras to one USB port in the computer. Yeah, Ted, you got the joke immediately. So we took off, and we're so proud of our configuration. We have 3 cameras aligned with the axis of the aircraft, taking, overlapping, beautiful. 2 are looking sideways, 15 degrees, complementing, but we never thought about, phase 1 IXU is 125 megabytes each picture. And at 280 knots, 28,000 feet, we take pictures every 2 seconds. So the computer was able to digest 1 set of pictures.
the wheels on the USB bus don't go round and round. Yeah.
Well, suddenly I heard on the radio my navigator saying, Mr. Plaza, the computer is dead. So I said, what's happened? It said we took the first photograph and everything is dead. So we have to land, and taking off and landing on a jet, it's about $2,500 for the mistake. And then we realized we called phase 1, and they say, no, you can't do that. We have a controller that you put everything in. Okay. So, but what I'm saying is, if you can make that mistake with a citation, and yes, the IX controller, that's right. Whoever put that there, I really appreciate it. The problem is getting into this, investing, the money creating an organization to do this and suddenly realizing that mistake is costly. And what I wanted to do with this event is bring those things to the forefront, to talk about it. Let's talk about it. Data, FAA. So, Ted, I would like to start with you. Let's talk about the FAA. Let's talk about, the things that you are sure that people are going to find if they get into this world.
Oh, gonna go down that road. Well, 21 is going to be a monumental year because you're going to start seeing companies going through certification. I mean, the one we did in 2016 was a full-blown Part 27 type class certification, and to date, still no one has attempted that. But there are about 40 drone manufacturers right now going through certification with the FAA. It's a watered-down version of it, but it's still a type class certification. The first one or ones will happen in the next 90 days, possibly this month.
Yes.
That's going to change everything. What people don't know is that the FAA doesn't write all these flight rules and procedures and stuff. The OEM does. And then they submit that as part of their application, and the FAA either says yes or no. And if they say, yes, you can do that, then they go, that looks good. Let's make that a law, a rule. And that's how it gets written, is the OEM submits it. If they say no, they have to do it within 2 weeks. And you have an unlimited number of attempts to come back to them and say, well, how about like this? Okay, we'll do it like this, until you turn a no into a yes. But in almost 100% of the cases, everything you see, these regulations coming out, including remote ID and all these things, are coming from the OEMs that are going through certification.
But by OEM, you mean the manufacturer?
The drone manufacturer themselves. Yeah. And this is not cheap. I mean, this is expect 3 years and easily $3 million just in the paperwork filings alone.
I know.
It's not
we discover what you're saying with this the 737 MAX debacle. We discovered that everything was written by Boeing, right? And the FAA was yes, 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 no, 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 yes, no. And all Boeing had to do is go back to this, go back to that. And as a pilot, I was very upset, to hear that an aircraft manufacturer on purpose excluded one system from the pilot training. And,
sure.
So
they can do that. They have the track record and the people to do it. Yeah, I mean, drones are the same thing. It's just that the drone industry has been dominated by people who have no inkling of an understanding of aviation regulations, and you can't go to a venture capital company and say, "Give me $10 million, and in 5 years, I think I'll have a prototype ready that we might be able to start producing and maybe selling." They're going to tell you to walk. But the guy that comes in the door says, "Oh, we don't have to do any of that stuff. We'll do it this way. We're going to disrupt all of aviation." Well, VCs love to hear that, and so many ways they actually created the situation we're all in.
Yeah,
because
but Ted,
they funded those deals.
Let's look at the problem from the other point of view. Let's look at the problem from the company. The company, if you're planning to bring people from point A to point B, you have to be a Part 135 or a Part 121.
Moving people as a commercial carrier, oh yeah, that's
right.
The hardest. Yeah, it took Honda 11 years and 1.7 billion to certify their jet.
Yeah, so when you become an aviation company, remember that I'm going to be bringing the conversation back to a land surveyor trying to do a UAV, right? So that person in the US needs to immediately get familiarized with Part 107, right?
Not 107, and that's going to all change this year. I mean, basically, does he really need to operate aircraft, a fleet of these things, or can he just rent the services? I mean, who buys helicopters?
Oh no, in that case you can subcontract, which was one of the questions this morning for one of our presenters. But if you're going to have your own aircraft and fly, then you have to get into registration and pilot, and then you have to register as a commercial enterprise with the FAA. What I'm trying to bring to the table is this is not trivial. It's changing the dynamic from the DMV to the FAA, and that's the simplest terms I can put it in.
Mm-hmm.
But I disagree. I think, if you're a commercial surveying company or collecting imagery for $1,500, you can get a Phantom 4, and for $200, you get your Part 107, and you register it for $5, and you follow the standard Part 107 rules, and you can add another tool to your toolkit. And I think it's never been easier to adopt at least small UAS for capturing imagery and creating maps. You can do it real time on your phone using some of the live map features. You can take the photos and submit them to the cloud, meaning you don't need a $3,500 laptop, to process. I think that it's been easier than ever to just adopt low cost technology and use them and begin to start mapping. Where I see there's really a couple of different culture clashes within the commercial drone industry that I think have really impacted our abilities to adopt the technology. One is, there's a lot of conversation around the FAA and the rules and everything that's coming down the pipeline. And I really appreciate the people like Ted that pay attention to that stuff so that I don't have to. I don't want to sit in those meetings and talk about remote ID. You just tell me what I need to buy and what I need to use, and I'll do that. That's just, for me, it's painful, and I would just put my head on the table and be like, didn't we already talk about this before? Because that's not where I'm coming from. I think on the flip side, you also see in the photogrammetry world people that are very nervous around the democratization of photogrammetry, because it's easy to get just enough rope to kind of hang yourself if you're trying to pass off data as kind of survey grade or quality data that you actually would need to be a surveyor. Whereas like now I can just take out my phone and I can take a Mavic and I can create a map. So what do I do with that capability if I'm, I work a lot in the agricultural space. If I'm just a researcher or an academic that wants to collect data, I don't need to be a licensed surveyor just to capture imagery. Now to pass it off as a surveyor, sure, I need to be a professional. So I think there's this whole gradient there and these worlds colliding of like, here's the aviation world. Honestly, as long as I follow the rules, I stay as far away from the aviation world as I possibly can. I just want to fly in Class G airspace and capture the imagery that I want, and then use that and manage those data layers. So I think that's kind of the space that I come from, is like, look, I don't want to have a lot of these conversations. You just tell me. You tell me what the rules are, and I'll follow the rules.
Yeah, but Craig, be careful, because the FAA 10 years ago said ADS-B is going to be mandatory, right? And they said January 1st, 2020, everybody has to fly. And let me explain to the non-pilots in the audience, ADS-B is a system that transmit the position of the aircraft, the registration of the aircraft. So you're constantly broadcasting your position, your altitude, your speed, your registration, and so on. So everybody else can see you. And the FAA gave everybody very strict guidelines, very simple. You need to have it January 1st, 2020. And that exploded. AOPA and the National Business Association, the NBAA, started lobbying Congress, and it was like 10 years of fighting, because it was $50 or $100 or $150 to add it to your aircraft, and the AOPA didn't want everybody to have to do that. So yes, I understand that from your point of view, maybe you're looking at it as an academic, give me the rules and I will follow them. People who have a drone and suddenly you tell them that you have to have this that costs $20 for remote ID, they're going to complain. So what I'm saying is, when you get into this world, the world of aviation, there are the good citizens, right? Like the Gregs of the world, and then the other ones who said, no, I want to do this way or that way.
Sure.
I think Greg's right. If you're doing there's not all one solution for all things. If you're flying in the middle of nowhere, looking at a ranch in Montana, 500,000 acres, go for it. Now if you want to do stuff that's over urban areas or lightly populated areas, the fastest way to do that is a certified aircraft, because you can fly all day long, stay in the air, and just go from point to point to point to point to point to point endlessly, entering different types of airspace, squawking as directed, talking to the tower remotely. With our technology, you can sit in New York and fly a drone into LAX right now if they'd let you. You could squawk, you can talk to the tower, you can see all the aircraft around you, and that. So it just depends what your mission is, right?
right? The mission, the mission inside, and it's true. Greg, I've been trying to. This panel was to see how difficult it is, and you just said, it's very easy, and I understand it is technologically very easy. My concern is that I don't want to be my industry to be the one that lands a phantom on top of somebody and kills it. I want every other industry in the world to do that instead of photogrammetry or mapping. I don't know if you
You're a
understand what I'm
pilot,
saying.
Juan.
Huh?
Sure.
You're a pilot.
I mean,
I'm not going to take a golf cart onto the 405 freeway. That'd be stupid. But a lot of people would. And they'd say, well, sure, I can merge into traffic. I can handle this. Well, you're going to get run over by a Hummer. And then you're going to say, well, I didn't know. And so the drone industry largely doesn't know what it doesn't know.
But where I have seen a lot of conscientious adoption of rules and regulation, these real estate photographers who are busy as crazy taking photographs. I mean, every house that is listed today as drone pic. And I was leaving my house yesterday, and I drove past Main Street, and I saw this guy with a vest, FAA approved drone pilot, and he was flying this house, and everything was, cones on the street, everything was safety, everything was, wow. If we can have that, in when we go into mapping, if that is the standard that we adopt when we go into this, then we're fine. Then I don't mind someone buying a
Smart.
phantom.
It's winning hearts and minds slowly, and you're less likely to have a nosy neighbor call the police who are going to bother you while you're just trying to get your work done. If you're showing that I'm responsible, it's not a sterile cockpit, but it's close enough for that kind of a mission. He's going to fly over the house. He's not going to fly over the freeway. So yeah, I agree. There's room for everybody. Just depends what the mission is.
And sorry, Greg, I think I interrupted you.
Oh, I mean, for each one of those people I've run into, the kid with the Mavic that's just taking pictures without the Part 107, that's just popping it up. And, I've worked in 6 major wildfire areas that are under TFRs, and with a dozen law enforcement teams that had filed all the necessary waivers, and we always see a rogue drone flying around from some news person that's like totally, or some other kid or whatever popping up there. So I think you can delegate all these roles. I think following them is pretty straightforward. I've had good luck with waivers and other aspects when I'm working in constricted airspace or restricted airspace as well. Filling out the form, giving enough lead time to get the permission that's in there. I think that's getting easier. Just for a lot of the basic applications of like, hey, I need to go survey this property, or hey, we're doing this particular project and I need to get out there. As long as you work within the current framework with a Mavic or a Phantom or a M200 or these kind of sub $10,000 drones, like it's pretty straightforward to capture the imagery that you need, both in color or multispectral, or thermal's a little bit trickier. You can process it super rapidly using, Pix40 React or Fields or some of these other rapid processing tools. I think it's just the democratization is there within the technology. I think we're just working out the growing pains of, okay, how do we do this legally? How do you deal with bad actors that are going to be out there? I mean, enforcement of the current rules, I think there's just not a lot of enforcement. Sure, we see like a lot of people not flying with Part 107 or getting it, but what happens to them? Nothing. They just, they're out there. It's part of their job. It's another tool, just like their phone or a camera or something like that. So I don't want to discourage people by saying like, this is super challenging, because it's like, no, it's like a 60 question multiple choice test for $200 and a $1,500 drone, and know your airspace that you check on your app and you're good to go. And if a helicopter comes in the area, like land. So I think some common sense and whatnot is that it's easier than ever to capture really good, high quality data for a lot of different applications out there. And if you're not an idiot and you're just trying to do your job, then it should be fairly straightforward.
Okay. Now, Joshua, from the point of view of the aircraft, and remember to unmute your phone, your microphone. from the point of view of the aircraft, what kind of equipment do you have to install or plan to install in the beta version to be able to comply with all these regulations?
Sure. So the remote ID, which will be coming online, over I think it's the next 18 months, if I'm not mistaken,
Mm-hmm.
Ted. So we haven't selected that hardware yet, but none of this stuff is difficult to integrate. We have a very robust architecture on our aircraft. We have a flight controller which is certified in Europe, at least, for use in optionally piloted aircraft. So it's a very high-end closed architecture flight controller. So it integrates really well with a lot of different technologies. It's got very long-range transmission for both video and telemetry. So we really are setting up the system to be able to fly far beyond line of sight. In a lot of the applications that we're looking at, for example, prescribed fire, where you're doing controlled ignition of certain wildlands to reduce fuel loads. Being able to do that at a long distance is super important. And obviously mapping plays into that, because you have to know where you're burning and then be able to show kind of before and after to quantify the results of the activity. I know this is kind of going a little bit far afield of your question, but the technology that we're that's most urgently coming down the pike is the remote ID. And I don't know, I don't think we're actually doing anything with ADS-B right now, but remote ID is the main thing.
What's interesting though about this is the size of your platform. What is your estimated hourly operating cost if you're carrying a light payload so you can fly for 8 straight hours?
Sure. Yeah. So if we were flying for 8 hours, we'd be burning 6.5 gallons of fuel, and the hourly maintenance cost on the hybrid power modules is surprisingly low. I don't want to release that information right now, but it's super low, which is kind of exciting. And also because, like I said, because it's all modular, so it's swap in, swap out on components, you're not paying a technician to be in the field tearing down the aircraft.
Bingo.
Which is really going to help.
Yeah. So what happens is, as this technology, this is what we were pushing back in 2012 to 16 with my unmanned aircraft company, was the operating cost is so cheap. The most expensive part of operating unmanned aircraft is the personnel involved. Sending people out there in a vehicle and setting stuff up. It's preposterous. It's like taking a helicopter and a trailer out to a field, then flying it, landing back on the trailer and dragging it to another part of town. Whereas a certified aircraft can navigate freely across a very large area of hundreds and hundreds of miles. And so from your laptop right here, you can control that aircraft and go from customer to customer to customer to customer. And I can just do that all day long without ever even leaving the house if you want to. And so even though the aircraft costs more and the operating hourly cost sounds like it's more, it's offset by how much work you can get done. So it becomes cheaper than operating even a Mavic, for example. And so they can do those services better. And therefore, then the little ones become inconsequential, because the bigger players that have these big, expensive aircraft can serve all kinds of customers nonstop, and they can go change from mission to mission. That's where things are going. I think we're a couple of years from that, but in the interim, there's a lot of room for small ones to get, especially in real estate, to get work. But eventually, I think that'll change, and that'll probably take a good 5 years.
Yeah, I mean, you're bringing up a very valid point, and I think that's going to drive a lot of the industry forward. And we've seen small operators already struggling because of the amount of competition. There's so many people that want to get out there and fly small drones to go do roof inspections and go do whatever, and like Greg was saying, to know just enough to be dangerous in the mapping industry, right? Like there's so much competition already, but if a company then can get their Part 135 and go fly a certified aircraft like you're saying, to multiple jobs over an 8-hour period, I mean, that's going to be a huge deal.
Mm-hmm.
But it's different tools for different. So like,
yeah,
I don't think you're going to have a drone pilot. You're going to have, so I'm a trained ecologist. And so I don't need to hire a drone pilot. I'm just an ecologist that knows how to use a drone. The same with like a land survey, you know, for doing smaller properties and high resolution on demand, having low cost drones. You know, I'm actually pretty excited about the sub 250 gram space. I think to get around the rules, I think what you can do with a 249 gram drone for $600 is going to be more interesting. So I think you'll see some of that divergence in there of like ultra small, pop it, it's in the truck, pop it out of my pocket, and that's what I'm going to use. You know,
I want to show. I'm going to go grab it. I want to show the audience. I just got the Mavic 2. Give me 1 second. Or the Mini 2.
So I think that there's a difference here in different industries, right? So I think like,
Sure.
you know, in commercial land surveying is way different than an individual construction site that's just doing like, you know, site management, et cetera. So
yeah, like ultimately it's a tool. It's just one of the many tools that you use, right?
Yeah,
do you need to be an air carrier with a fleet of aircraft? No, probably not. Do you need to fly it yourself? Can you have somebody else fly it for you? Just tell them what to do,
right.
Or do you have to be actually present and involved in that real-time mapping?
Ted, but because we have people from all over the world, we had someone from India earlier today. I mean, sometimes it's very difficult, right, to generalize. I know that for the U.S., you know, finding that, but the two testimonials that we had this morning, I mean, these guys had to do everything from scratch, and one of them has a fleet of 3 aircraft, like a DJI, a Trimble UX5, and an EB Model X. So right, exactly. So they're dealing with this in a very responsible manner, and unfortunately, most of countries are treating drones like just another aircraft. Alejandro from Venezuela was telling me there's no difference. We need medicals. They need medical certificates for the license. Okay, so
it's extreme.
But that's a different challenge than like the capabilities of the drone and your ability to capture and process the data. Like I understand the legal rules and the restrictions out there, but the capability to like create maps and capture imagery today is really like a smartphone and a sub $1,000 drone and a little bit of knowledge, you know.
We're like a professor has said, we're in heated agreement, but the issue is if you're moving into this, it's not the hardware and the software and how easy it is to do. It's that it's your company, right? You're moving your company from a pickup truck to a plane. So all the issues that are related to this, and I love the fact that we have someone who said, no, it's easy. Okay, yes, it is. But when you're technologically it's easy, but the mentality of that drone falling from the sky, I want our industry to go into this knowing full well that we can be the ones landing on top of somebody. And
sure, but I would flip it with the aviation industry. I mean, I see people in helicopters flying below 500 feet all the time, you know.
Well, they're allowed to. They can fly at 50 feet if they want to.
100%. But I think that like the flip side has to be that the aviation industry has to also work with, it shouldn't just be that, you know, I work in areas with crop dusters and other kind of agricultural areas, and those guys don't have ADS-B. They don't show up on my phone or my tracking app. You know, they do whatever they want, and that's okay. But I think that it has to go both ways in terms of approaching it from a non-aviation perspective of like, look, you know, from 400 feet down with a 2-pound thing, you know, under most standard conditions is not flying at Gatwick or whatever, you know. So
exactly. Gatwick is a great example. So Joshua, you wanted to show us something.
Yeah, I just was kind of picking up on what Greg said, which is, you know, this is 249 grams, and it's got a 4K camera on it. And this morning on the very first time I ever used it, I took off and I flew over a solar array on the roof of a building and like inspected it, just for fun. And, so, and this is an extremely useful tool, whether something like this can be, can have the appropriate technology to make a useful map for the mapping industry. I'm not familiar enough with that, but I think the answer is probably yes in many cases.
Yeah, I mean, the camera's not great, but that's today, right? And so in 5 years, when it has a 50 megapixel camera that's ultra small and high quality or whatever, I think your capabilities are just, one thing that it does have is onboard processing. So it'll stitch panoramas on board in real time. We've used that in some of the disaster responses we've captured hundreds and hundreds of panoramas across wildfire zones, and it processes on board a $499 drone or whatever. So I think those are that's the world that I live in. It's not like this aviation world. It's not even the survey and photogrammetry world. It's like, hey, mass adoption of these tools for a lot of applications is where we're at. Do you need basic understanding to fly safely? Yes. Should you be required to have a Part 107 or some professional certificate if you're using it for commercial applications? Absolutely. But that framework is there today. Even the land system, like on my phone, I can go in and get approval to fly in other airspace. And if something happens, I just land. If there's a helicopter coming in, I just land. So,
yeah. There is a question here from the audience for Joshua. How does Parallel go around the FAA LOS requirements?
I'm sorry, I know it's for Josh, but wow, this takes me back a few years.
Yeah, Ted, I missed it on the, when we did our prep for this, that you were the brains behind that aircraft, because I've seen that quite a bit. So I'd love to offline just talk with you a little bit. So we're not flying beyond line of sight right now. First of all, we are going to be doing a demonstration mission, which is extended visual line of sight. I haven't broadly announced this yet, but I'm happy to share with this group. We're working closely with an organization in Alaska called SqwaQ, which is the Alaska Center for Unmanned blah, blah, blah. And they're kind of a leader in the space, working with drone companies and with the aviation authorities to do demonstration missions. And we're going to be doing an extended visual line of sight mission where we deliver medical supplies to a village. Now, it's a demonstration mission for what will eventually be beyond line of sight. But to do the mission, we're going to have a chase plane, or we're going to have a chase boat. I'm not sure where we're going to go yet.
Yeah. And I'll chime in on that one to whoever asked that question. You don't go around those regulations. You don't skirt them. You just comply. It's very simple. In fact, we're looking for a city or a county right now that's ready to integrate a citywide or countywide unmanned aircraft system. There's a lot that goes involved with that. And so far, we haven't found a city council that's got the balls to do it, because there's always one person that wants to grandstand and turn it into a political chip. But I'd love to work with a drone manufacturer that wants to do that right now, immediately. And
Well,
with FAA approval and cooperation, citywide operation.
and I will say, go ahead.
Sorry, by having a drone pilot, you mean sitting somewhere remotely?
In the community, yeah, the same operating model as we did with Alaris, which was a fleet of them across the city that become first response drones. It auto launches, goes to the location, videos fed live to the comm center. Ground responders can see the visuals, but they should not be burdened with operating it. No police or sheriff or fireman has any reason to be thumbs on sticks. It's preposterous. They don't know this. They're just excited about the technology and what it could do. So we'd like to help them see the next step.
Okay, Greg, sorry.
Oh, that's okay. I just thought, I do think that the line of sight regulations, like is really limiting the cost effectiveness of large scale surveys and data capture. I've worked a lot in the agricultural space, and I think it's cheaper to get satellite imagery or Cessna imagery, then map, for all of Iowa, then whereas, small UAS are better for, I work in research test plots for some of the companies. That's like where drones succeed, or smaller vineyards that are high value. I think moving more towards this drone in a box applications for so many of the dull, dangerous, and dirty jobs that the imagery is good for is really the future of it. And I don't fly drones for fun. I do it for data capture. So the less I have to fly, I would be fine with that too. I'll just park a box out there.
Right. I've seen a lot of applications for inside jobs like pipes, tanks, unbelievable safety for workers who used to have to go into these things, holding hydrocarbons for 20 years, and they have to be inspected. I mean, the amount of lives that this industry will be saving in the next few years is going to be unbelievable. Unfortunately, there will be jobs lost also, but people will not die in stupid accidents because of this technology. And again, the only reason I'm doing this is because I don't want us, the mapping guys, to be the ones landing on a baby on a park. That's my nightmare scenario. And
I think, sorry.
No, Joshua, one thing I was going to ask
Yeah.
you, because I remember the ADS-B controversy. One thing was a price, but something that never came up was weight. And I think because, if you're flying a Bonanza, who cares about this, something weighing a pound. But if you, with remote ID, do you see a weight consideration for when you're designing your equipment?
It has almost no effect on our payload. It's going to matter for smalls, for really small drones, that have to integrate the technology. But I guess, Juan, the thing that I'm hearing from you is like, you don't want someone from the mapping industry to have an accident because it kind of smears the whole industry. But honestly, like, I think if anybody who has a drone accident for any industry, it kind of like, people aren't going to differentiate between, oh, this guy was mapping and this guy was doing roof inspection. They're just going to say like, hey, a drone killed somebody or a drone hurt somebody. It's, everybody's got to be careful and be responsible and follow the rules. And that's just going to take a lot of education and a lot of outreach, and maybe some anti-drone guns, which I know have been developed, so,
Yes.
but yeah, I mean, I just think it's great to set the precedent in your industry, which is wonderful, but, it really has to be, for everybody who's flying.
And they've gotten a lot. I mean, they've gotten a lot safer in the past 5 years or so. They don't quite fly away as often as they used to. They come home, like, they're pretty straightforward. I think, it's I worry more about someone's dog running up and biting it, and but I live in the Bay Area and people have really expensive dogs, so I think
it's kind of funny. The FAA actually has been eager for the last 10 years to introduce this technology and let it proliferate wildly. The problem is that nobody would embrace them. Everybody took the stance of fighting the FAA rather than just cooperating. And when we were the only ones saying, well, let's cooperate, that's a faster path to get there, no one saw it. It wasn't until years later that they're starting to realize that what we were saying back in 12, 13, 14, and 15 was correct. And it's still happening now. So you approach the FAA, you got a better way to do things, and they're all over it. They would love to do it because it just helps them catch up with the technology. There's a lot of room here for
you're correct. It surprised me how eager the FAA is interested in advancing this technology. They're excited, but they have these internal dilemma, this fight. We need to keep the same level of safety.
Safety.
Right? We're not
sure,
going
based
to,
on the risk class of that aircraft, sure.
Right,
but
right.
I mean, go back to 2015, we had probably 6 hours worth of conference calls arguing over the word autonomy. and because it's in all of our paperwork, and they couldn't find a substitute that they would work with. Well, it's autonomous. In their vocabulary, autonomous means either a missile with a failed guidance system or artillery. Either rate, uncontrollable, out of control, and extremely dangerous. So they're like, don't use the word autonomy or autonomous anymore. So, well, how do you do that then? And
change the nomenclature.
there's a lot of things, yeah. So
For
that
that,
still exists now.
You need lawyers.
It's just a word, but that was blocking pages and pages of line items that we had to go through. And yeah, it's just little things. You need a Rosetta Stone to talk to the FAA, but once you have that, then it's all over. You just gotta know how they think. It's just kind of through the looking glass.
But it's good that we realize that the FAA is not necessarily the enemy. They're trying.
Oh, they're a friend. They're not foe. Exactly.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
The industry has demonized them simply because the industry wanted to go around it, skirt the rules, do it their way, disrupt, and they had it in their minds that they're going to disrupt aviation just like everything else. And Silicon Valley had to learn that you can't do that with aviation. Their number one mandate is protect safety in the skies.
Right.
And the number two mandate is protect safety on the ground from the things that are in the air. So when your drone falls out of the air onto the windshield of a car doing 70 miles per hour, I mean, all hell's going to break loose, right? So that's the stuff they're worried about.
You started your presentation with the certification issue, and I think the FAA is giving us, hope by relaxing a little bit on the certification as means of preparing the entire industry to move a little bit closer.
Yeah, just know that it's not only the FAA, it's manufacturers who've been in that loop for 2 years getting their stuff certified. Now, once you get certified, you have more power as an OEM, as Boeing showed with the 737. So companies coming behind all these guys who want to certify their aircraft have to go through these public hearing sessions. And them already being certified, they can drop bombs on you, basically saying, well, I don't know about that company. We're kind of concerned about blah, 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 blah. And they can slow you down a year or two in your own certification project because you're already there, which is something we were
sorry about this, but it's 4 o'clock in the East, and we need to move on. That was great. Greg, thank you very much for the cold shower of it's a lot easier than
totally easy.
I love it. I love it because I came into this with a view of and you helped me a lot refrain the discussion. Thank you, Joshua. Thank you, Ted. Thank you, Greg. Come to the lounge later for a happy hour if you can.